In this class, we want to introduce some ideas related to doing business online and introduce the whole topic of online business. So to start, let's have an overview of eBusiness. First of all, we have the concept of electronic commerce or electronic business, and it's also sometimes referred to as e-commerce and e-business. By this is meant the conduct of trading with the assistance of telecommunications and telecommunications-based tools. So in other words, the business is conducted with the aid of electronic networks, computer networks. E-business therefore encompasses a wide range of activities such as e-commerce, e-publishing, and electronic services delivery. But it's widely used in business for all sorts of purposes, from e-procurement to online recruitment. So it's become crucially important for modern day business and the conduct of modern day business. Its scope extends across the business activities of all categories of organizations and individuals, whether they're undertaken for profit or for non-profit, undertaken in the context of the community or of clubs or whatever. The use of computer networks, the use of the internet has become ubiquitous. It's widely used by virtually every type of organization. The terms e-commerce and e-business are applied to the use of electronic data interchange, EDI, electronic data interchange, EDI, and value-added networks, VANs, V-A-N-S, value-added networks, and various forms of online services. And these have been around and developing since the 1980s, but really have taken off in the last probably 10 years. The terms became most popular with the explosion of public use of the internet and of key services enabled by the internet, particularly email and the World Wide Web. There's been a greater consciousness on the part of the public and of business about the uses of the internet and the uses of the World Wide Web for all sorts of purposes, commercial purposes, for efficiency and for how to gain greater productivity in business. And for individuals, it helps us search solutions to problems and also engage in online shopping and communications, better communications within groups or within families. The terms are now segmented because it is recognized that significantly different factors are at work in the various relationships amongst business. So we can identify different types of relationships that apply. For example, the government is one sector, consumers are a different sector, citizens, and businesses. So we have a whole range of relationships that we can imagine. For example, B2B, business to business. One business, one company dealing with another company, perhaps buying raw materials or arranging for distribution. A company dealing with another company may use computer networks to facilitate communications and coordinate the whole activity. But there could also be B2C, business to consumers. The companies could sell directly to customers. We also have C2C, customers to customers, where customers post their experiences perhaps in blogs online so that other customers or potential customers can read about their experiences, and that may influence their purchase decision. And so on. B2G, business to government, G2B, government to business, G2C, government to consumer, G to G, one government dealing with another government, C to G, customers dealing with the governments, C to B, customers dealing with businesses. So we can imagine all sorts of almost permutations here, all sorts of relationships that can go on within the context of our discussion of the use of the internet in business and in commerce. .com has become synonymous with the use of online business. We often talk about the .com sector. .com is, well, the .com is a top-level domain. It's one of the American domains. The DOT is just spelling it out, .com. In the late 90s, .com fever turned investors into gamblers. Anyone with a website in the 1990s stood a chance of making money out of the website. It's like investors truly wanted to be involved in the internet. They saw it as the future, they saw it as good investment potential. And a lot of people were attracted in as investors into financing websites and financing ideas associated with the internet. It was a new phenomenon. It was new, something which had never happened commercially before, and to that extent no one was really that well prepared as to how to handle it, how to assess it. Normally when people invest in business, they look at traditional documentation, profit projections and return on investment, and they look at whatever information they can get about the business before they make an investment. Well, with the .com situation, there was no history. So it became a rush, a blind rush almost, to invest without proper analysis or documentation. So awareness and then the reflection necessary preceded understanding. So there was very little understanding on the part of investors back in the 90s about this new phenomenon. And there was a new language. The internet had its new terminology, and I'll talk about that again later, but it had a new language, and it had a new type of entrepreneur. Young, very active, speaking in a very sophisticated and technological manner. So it became interesting to investors. So there was a great deal of interest in the internet at the time, and a lack of scrutiny, as in the case of traditional business. As I said, with traditional business, investors may look at projected returns on investment, the size of the market, the competitive environment. They may look at some strategic measures like pest, and they might look at SWOT to see what the internal strengths and weaknesses of the business are. But in this case, there was a rush to try and get investment into the .com sector, into the internet sector. And of course, the ones who came in late were the experts, because they could look back and say, well, this is what happened. As it turned out, it was a disaster. A lot of people lost a lot of money, and I suppose learned from the experience. So that now, when someone within the internet sector, someone develops a good website, people don't dream of billions and billions of pounds. They perhaps look ahead more cautiously, look at investment and look at the market and look at the competitive situation, look at all the traditional measures that applies to a bricks and mortar business. So being caught up in this sort of rush to become a billionaire, that was that came and it went, and now it's a much more traditional type of approach to evaluating online business. Market instability. Well, there was a complete lack of stability in the e-business sector. Back in the 90s, technology was rapidly developing and evolving, and there was all sorts of expectations that this was going to be the new future, and the business models that people had studied at university and people had grown up on, these business models would be somehow overthrown, and there would be a new way of looking at business. There was a high degree of, as I said earlier, terminological confusion. The language was confusing. People were talking about servers and server sides and server clients, and there was a new language. It was something completely new, and investors were confused by it and just generally tried to put money in to try and make their millions. So there were new phrases, new words, and when a word was not adequate, somebody made up a new word again, and it became accepted terminology. So there was a perception that e-business was borderless. It did apply globally, because once the hyperlinks were published, the business could operate globally. And that was totally new to investors. They were looking at businesses who could now operate over vast different distances. So the reach of the business was extensive, and for that reason, again, they were attracted into investing in the business. But as I said earlier, the businesses did not have the traditional scrutiny of looking at the competitive environment, looking at the competitors, what they were doing, looking at the extent of the market, looking at the returns on investment. So it was inevitable that the dot-com bubble would burst, as it did. So that nowadays investors are much more circumspect about investing in this type of situation, this type of company. So that's our introduction to e-business. It starts with almost a disaster. It starts with enthusiasm for the medium, operating a business in a borderless sense, and investors rushing to put money in, and then finding that traditional business tools had not been outdated. Traditional business tools, break-even analysis, projected profits, and all of that, they were still relevant, and they're as relevant today as they've ever been. And a lot of people lost money, and nowadays there's a lot more caution about investing in the sector, and whatever investment does take place, it's generally speaking evaluated using the same traditional tools that would have been used 50 years ago. So that's our introduction to e-business. Having said all of that, e-business exists, it's developing, it's got major benefits to business, and in terms of communications, and in terms of its limitlessness, in terms of the fact that it operates across borders and across countries, and so it has got a lot of advantages, and that's what the subject matter of a study of e-business will involve, and that's what we'll look at in the coming classes. But that's all I'm going to do for the moment, so I'm going to say leave it at that and say thank you for watching.